Marcus had been stationed at the Galactic Outpost for several months. He had seen more than enough action in his military career, but now he was adjusting to the quieter routine of life at this far-off base. The starbase was set on a peaceful moon, orbiting a small, nearly forgotten planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy. There were no wars or battles here, just the occasional merchant ship passing by, and a few stray travelers who came for rest. One morning, Marcus was sipping his usual cup of coffee in the common room when a sudden loud knock on the door interrupted his peace. It was a peculiar sound, like a soft but urgent knock, unlike anything he had heard before. Confused, Marcus got up from his seat and went to the door. He wasn't expecting any visitors, and certainly not this early. When he opened the door, he saw a young woman standing in the hallway. She wasn't human, but she didn't seem threatening either. The woman was tall and slender, her skin a rich shade of deep purple with intricate silver markings along her arms. Her eyes were a striking gold and her long silver hair shimmered under the fluorescent lights of the outpost. Despite her unusual appearance, there was something strangely welcoming about her presence. "Hello," she said with a gentle smile. Her voice had a soft yet confident tone. "I'm Lyra of the Zoran people. May I speak with you?" Marcus blinked in surprise. He had never heard of the Zoran, but he had learned to keep his guard up when meeting new species. "Sure, come on." "In," he said, stepping aside to allow her entry. Once inside, Lyra sat down without waiting for permission. "I apologize for the sudden visit. It's just that... I have a very important question for you," she began, looking at him with a curious expression. Marcus sat back down, intrigued. "What's on your mind?" he asked, not sure what to expect. Why they won? Why not? Well, like we went. Why we had? Why? I wanted to ask if you have a companion yet, a partner, someone to stand beside you in life. Her question was blunt, but not unkind. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Companion? Not sure I understand. Lyra nodded. You see, my people believe in forming strong bonds with those who can help us grow. My mother is a powerful woman, and she's looking for someone strong enough to appreciate her. I think you might be the one. Marcus was taken aback. I'm not sure what you mean by that, he said slowly. What do you mean by someone strong enough to appreciate her? And why are you telling me this? Lyra looked at him, her golden eyes serious now. My mother is unlike any other. She is a warrior, a master of both combat and baking. She has saved many, but never received the respect she deserves. She's been alone for too long, and I believe you might be the one who can offer her the respect she needs. Marcus blinked, trying to process what she had just said. Wait, are you saying you want me to marry your mother? Lyra's smile grew wider. Exactly. She bakes the most incredible dishes in the galaxy, and she can defeat the strongest warriors with her skills. Yet people fear her. They never see her for who she truly is, a woman in need of companionship, understanding, and perhaps ... love. Feared for her power? Marcus rubbed his chin, his mind racing. So, you want me to marry her, so she can have some peace? Yes. Lyra said softly. I believe you would be the one who could see her for who she really is. Not just a warrior, not just a baker, but a woman who has so much to offer to the right person. Marcus was still trying to wrap his head around the idea. This wasn't something he had ever imagined, not in a million years. A marriage proposal, especially one from an alien woman he had just met, was the last thing he expected today. But there was something about Lyra's earnestness that made him pause. She wasn't asking for anything selfish. She genuinely believed this could help her mother. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked, still unsure of how to respond. Lyra smiled, her golden eyes gleaming. "Now you come with me to meet my mother. You'll see her for yourself. Then you can decide if you want to take the next step." Marcus nodded slowly. He had never thought he would be invited to meet an alien's mother in such a unique way, but here he was. His curiosity was piqued, and despite everything, he felt compelled to see where this strange encounter might lead. "Well," he said with a wry smile, "I suppose I don't have anything else planned today." Lyra's smile widened. "Good. You'll see. It'll be worth it." Marcus followed Lyra through the winding paths of the Zoran settlement, his mind still buzzing from their earlier conversation. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something completely out of his element. The world around him was unlike anything he had ever seen before. The Zoran planet was a place of beauty and mystery, with tall trees that seemed to glow faintly and buildings that looked like they were made of living vines. The air smelled fresh, like flowers mixed with something rich and warm. Perhaps it was the baking that Lyra had spoken of as they walked. Lyra didn't seem to notice Marcus's hesitation. She was walking confidently, her strides quick and purposeful. She turned her head every now and then to make sure he was still behind her, but mostly her attention was focused ahead, her golden eyes shining with excitement. Finally, they reached a large stone building covered with climbing plants. It was taller than any of the structures Marcus had seen, and it had a warm, welcoming glow to it. There were wide windows that showed the inside, where Marcus could just make out a large stone oven and the faint flicker of light from cooking tools. "This is where my mother lives," Lyra said, her voice soft but filled with pride. She paused. For a moment, glancing at Marcus, "She's in the kitchen. It's where she spends most of her time. You'll understand why when you taste her food." Marcus felt a little nervous. He'd always been a simple man when it came to food. He wasn't exactly a gourmet chef, but he wasn't going to back out now. He had come this far. Something about Lyra's conviction kept him moving forward. They entered the building, and the rich smell of baking hit Marcus like a wave. It was so much more intense inside, like the very air was filled with the scent of fresh bread and pastries. The walls were lined with shelves full of jars and bags, each containing different ingredients. There were bowls of dough on the counter, and the fire in the oven crackled softly in the background. Lyra led him past the kitchen to a large dining area, where an older woman was sitting at the head of a long table, working on a piece of bread. "Do." The woman looked up as they entered, and Marcus was struck by how imposing she was. She was taller than Lyra, built with a muscular frame that spoke of years of battle. Her face, though older, still held the fierce eyes of a warrior, and her presence filled the room with a quiet power. "This is my mother," Lyra said, her voice full of respect. "Mother, this is Marcus." Zora stood up slowly, her movements graceful, despite her size. She was dressed in simple clothes, but there was no mistaking the strength in her posture. She walked toward Marcus, her eyes studying him carefully. "So, you're the one my daughter has brought to me," Zora said, her voice deep but kind. "I must say you don't look like the kind of man who would accept such a strange request." Marcus felt a little awkward under her gaze, but tried to stand tall. "I'm not sure what to say. Just ... confused, I guess." Zora smiled slightly, the corners of her mouth lifting in amusement. "You're not the first one to be confused by my daughter's proposal. She has a way of throwing people off balance, but she's right about one thing. I've spent my life in battle, and I've earned a reputation for being fierce. But I have also learned to bake, and it's a gift I'm proud of, even if the galaxy hasn't recognized it." Marcus glanced at Lyra, who seemed to be waiting for him to respond. He cleared his throat. "I don't know what to say. You're a warrior and a baker, and your daughter wants me to marry you. That's a lot to take in," Zora chuckled, a deep, throaty laugh that echoed through the room. I'm not asking you to marry me right away. First, I want you to understand what kind of woman I am. If you can respect me, then perhaps we can discuss more. But don't mistake my offer for something simple. I don't need a companion for protection or status. I need someone who will see beyond the surface. Marcus didn't know how to answer. He had been around many different species, and he had heard of warriors and diplomats. But never a woman like Zora. She seemed to carry an air of both strength and sadness, as though her life had been lived in the shadows of expectations and battles. Never having the chance to truly be herself, Lyra watched him carefully, her golden eyes bright. You don't have to say yes today, Marcus. Just ... Spend time with her. Learn what she's really like. I believe you'll see her in a way no one else has. Marcus nodded, though he still didn't fully understand the situation. But as Zora set a fresh loaf of bread in front of him, the warm, inviting smell made him pause. It wasn't just about food. There was something about this moment that felt important. Could tell that Zora, for all her strength, was offering something more than just a marriage proposal. She was offering him a glimpse into her world, a world of strength, of challenges, and of a desire to be seen for who she truly was. I'll stay, Marcus said after a moment. I'll see what you're offering. Had expected that answer. Good, she said simply. Then let's begin. Marcus sat at the large table in the dining room, the soft glow of the lights flickering gently around the room. Zora had just plaque. At a steaming dish of freshly baked bread on the table in front of him. It was warm, its scent filling the air with the promise of something rich and delicious. Yet, despite the pleasant aroma, Marcus couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. The situation was so strange. A woman, a warrior, and baker from an alien race was offering him something he couldn't quite understand, and her daughter, Lyra, was waiting for him to make a choice. Zora sat across from him, her sharp eyes watching his every move. She had a quiet presence, and Marcus felt her strength without her saying a word. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met, and he wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. So, Marcus, Zora began, her voice calm but commanding. Do you like the bread? Marcus took a bite, tasting the warm, soft bread with a hint of herbs. It was unlike anything he had ever tasted. The flavors were bold, yet delicate, each bite leaving him wanting more. He looked up at her, a little surprised. It's amazing, he said honestly. I've never had anything like it before. Zora smiled, pleased by his response. I've spent many years perfecting my craft, she said. Baking is as much about balance as fighting. Each ingredient, like each movement in combat, must be carefully measured and controlled. When done right, the result is something beautiful. Marcus nodded, intrigued by her passion. I can tell. It's truly impressive. But there's more than just baking here, Marcus, Zora continued. What I'm offering you is not just a chance to taste my food, but a chance to understand who I am. I have lived a life full of battles, and I've been respected for my strength. But my strength is not all I have to offer. Oh, I truly am. I've fought long enough. I've spent too many years alone, never being seen for anything other than my strength. But I am more than that. Lyra, who had been quietly sitting at the side, spoke up. Mother's not asking for anything from you, Marcus. She's simply giving you the opportunity to see her differently. You don't have to decide anything now. But if you choose to stay and learn, you'll see the other side of Hearthaside that's been hidden for so long. Marcus looked at Lyra, then back at Zora. The offer was overwhelming, but there was something about it that stirred something deep inside him. He had been around soldiers, commanders, and leaders all his life, but he had never been asked to see someone as a whole person, not just a soldier or a baker, but as a human and individual with layers and complexities. Why me? Marcus finally asked, his voice quieter now. Why choose me for this? There must be many others who would be better suited for what you want. Zora's eyes softened as she answered, because you are human. Your people are known for your resilience, your strength, but also your ability to see the value in others. You're not afraid to look beyond the surface, and that's what I need. I don't need a man who will be intimidated by my strength or my past. I need someone who will stand beside me, see me for what I am, and offer me the respect I've never had. Marcus felt a weight settle on his shoulders. This was more than just an offer. It was a challenge to see the world through someone else's eyes. Zora wasn't asking for a soldier or a protector. She was asking for a companion, someone to stand beside her, not because of her strength, but because of who she was as a person. "I'll stay," Marcus said finally, his voice steady. "I'll stay and learn. But I need to understand more about you, about your life, about everything." Zora's face softened into a smile, and Lyra looked at him with a gleam of approval in her eyes. "That's all I ask, Marcus," Zora said. "Take your time. There's no rush. Just understand that there's more to me than the warrior you see." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of purpose building inside him. This wasn't just about a strange marriage proposal or a warrior's pride. It was about understanding, seeing, beyond what was in front of him, and perhaps finding something more than he had ever expected. As they continued to talk, the evening wore on, and Marcus began to understand that this was not just about baking or battles. It was about connection, and for the first time, he realized that he might be able to offer Zora the one thing she had never had companionship without: expectation. The days that followed Marcus's decision to stay with the Zoran people passed by quietly. The planet was beautiful, but it was not a place for peace. There was something about the air here, something that seemed to hum with energy and purpose. The constant motion of the people, the sounds of nature mixed with the steady rhythm of Zora's baking, and the quiet hum of conversations around him made Marcus feel strangely at home. Yet, despite the comfort of the place, a weight pressed down on him. Every time he saw Zora, he saw the strength in her commanding presence, her skill as a warrior, and her quiet grace. But there was something else, too. Zora had opened up, in ways Marcus had never expected, sharing stories of her past, of the battles she had fought and the struggles she had faced. It was clear she had a deep longing for something more, but it was equally clear that Marcus was not sure what to do with this feeling she had. He awakened inside him. He often found himself walking the outskirts of the settlement, trying to think things through. He would pause by the cliffs that overlooked the valley, staring out at the distant horizon, lost in thought. There was so much about this world he didn't understand. He had lived a life defined by duty, loyalty, and the strict code of soldiers. But here, none of that seemed to matter. One evening, after another long day spent with Zora and Lyra, Marcus found himself standing at the edge of the settlement once again. The stars were beginning to show, twinkling in the clear night sky, and the soft breeze carried the scent of fresh herbs from the nearby fields. But tonight, Marcus's mind was clouded. He had been talking with Zora earlier, and for the first time, she had asked him a question that made him uneasy. "Do you think you could ever see me as more than a warrior?" She had asked, her voice soft, yet full of meaning. "Could you see me as someone you could truly be with?" The question had caught him off guard. He had been listening, really listening to her stories and to what she had to say. But now the weight of that question hung in the air like a heavy fog. Could he ever see her as more than a warrior? It was a question Marcus hadn't expected. His life, he had always been trained to focus on what was important, what was necessary. He had never really given much thought to relationships beyond duty. He hadn't been in a real relationship before, and even though he was beginning to understand Zora's depth, the idea of being with her felt foreign. Just as Marcus was lost in thought, a figure appeared beside him. Lyra, her golden eyes gleaming, stood silently for a moment before speaking. "You're thinking too much," she said softly, her voice full of understanding. "My mother isn't asking for much. She's asking for someone who sees her as she is. Not just as a warrior, not just as a baker, but as a person. Can you do that?" Marcus turned to look at her, the question lingering in the air. "I don't know if I can, Lyra. She's different. She's everything I've never known. Strong, powerful, capable. I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know if I'm what she needs." Lyra stepped closer, her expression serious. "You don't have to have all the answers. You just need to be honest. And you need to understand that she doesn't need a man to take care of her. She's been alone for a long time, and she's not looking for someone to rescue her. She's looking for someone who will stand beside her, not in front of her. It's not about being strong, it's about being real. Marcus absorbed her words, the weight of them sinking in. Maybe that was the problem. He had always believed that strength defined a person. It was a lesson he had been taught over and over again throughout his military training. But now, with Zora, he was beginning to realize that maybe it was vulnerability, understanding and connection that truly mattered. "You're right," he said quietly, a sense of clarity washing over him. "It's just dot. Hard to see her in a way that's different from what I've always known." Lyra smiled softly, a warm, understanding expression. "I know. But the first step is seeing her as someone you can learn from, not just someone you admire, but someone who teaches you something new. It's about seeing the person, not the title. If you do that, I think you'll understand her more than anyone else ever could." Marcus nodded, the weight in his chest easing just a little. He didn't have all the answers, but he could take the first step. He could listen more, learn more, and open himself to something that was completely new. That night, Marcus made a decision. He would speak with Zora, not as a soldier, not as someone who was unsure of his place, but as a man who was willing to see her as more than what she showed the world. The next morning, Marcus found Zora in the kitchen, as usual, kneading dough with her strong, practiced hands. She looked up when he entered, her eyes softening when she saw him. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, as if both were waiting for the other to speak. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty, "about what you asked me the other night, about seeing you as more than a warrior." Zora raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. "I think I can," he continued, taking a step closer to her. "I don't have all the answers yet, but I'm willing to try. I want to see you as more than just strength. I want to understand you." Zora smiled, a soft, knowing smile that made Marcus's heart skip a beat. "That's all I ask, Marcus," she said, her voice quiet. "Just take your time. There's no rush. But I believe you're capable of more than you think." Marcus didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. With Zora, with Lyra, and with the strange new world that had somehow become a part of him, the days seemed to pass quickly now that Marcus had made the decision to stay and understand Zora better. The settlement had become less strange to him, and he found himself slowly adjusting to the rhythm of the Zoran people. Zora's house, with its warm sense of baking and quiet calm, had become a place of peace for him, a place where he could finally think clearly. But, despite his growing comfort, something still hung in the air. It's an unspoken challenge that Marcus knew would eventually have to be faced. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, Zora approached him while he was helping Lyra with the garden. She seemed more serious than usual, her posture straight and her eyes focused. "Marcus," she began, her voice steady, "it's time we had the final conversation. The one where you decide whether or not you can truly see me for who I am." Marcus looked up from the plants he was trimming, surprised by the sudden shift in her tone. "What do you mean?" Zora smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I know you've been thinking about our offer, and I've been thinking about it too. I want to see if you're ready to truly understand who I am. To see if you can accept me not just as a warrior or a baker, but as a woman who has lived a full life. I want to test you, Marcus, not in a way that would hurt you, but in a way that will show me if you're ready to accept what I offer." That, Zora turned and walked away, leaving Marcus standing in the garden, his heart beating faster. He had no idea what kind of test she was talking about, but he knew he couldn't back down now. If he wanted to truly understand her, he had to face whatever challenge she had in mind. As the day faded into evening, Marcus ate with Zora and Lyra in the kitchen, the smell of the fresh bread filling the air. They ate in silence for the most part, and Marcus found himself thinking about the test. What was Zora trying to prove? What, more importantly, what was he supposed to learn from it? After dinner, as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Marcus made his way to the training ground. The area was quiet, surrounded by high stone walls, with weapons displayed on racks along the side. Zora was already waiting for him, standing, tall and strong, as always. She held a wooden staff in her hand, which she twirled effortlessly. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice sharp. Marcus nodded, though his nerves were beginning to settle into a slow, tight knot in his stomach. I'm ready. Zora gestured for him to step forward. This will not be a typical fight, Marcus. It will be about more than strength. You will face me in combat, but it will also involve something you have yet to understand: balance. You must trust your instincts, just as you trust your strength. If you can do that, then you will see me for who I am. Marcus wasn't sure what she meant by balance, but he had learned enough about Zora to know that she was serious. Wasn't going to hold back. Without warning, Zora moved swiftly toward him. Marcus had been trained in combat for most of his life, and his reflexes kicked in immediately. He blocked her first strike with the staff, but Zora was faster than he had anticipated. She spun around him, knocking his staff aside with a well-placed strike. Marcus quickly regained his stance, but Zora didn't give him a moment to recover. She moved again, her movements graceful yet deadly. Marcus found himself on the defensive, trying to keep up with her fluidity. It wasn't just about strength, it was about her control, her ability to read his movements before he could make them. He was used to fighting against opponents who relied on raw power, but Zora was different. She moved with a calm, focused intensity that was almost like dancing, and Marcus struggled to find his rhythm. But as the minutes passed, something started to click. He began to let go of his rigid training, trusting his body and instincts to guide him. Zora paused, watching him closely as he adapted to her movements. "Good," she said. "You're learning." Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead, his breath coming in quick bursts. "I didn't expect you to be this fast," he admitted. Zora gave him a rare smile. "You thought of me as only a warrior. But you're beginning to understand that there's more to combat than just speed and power. It's about balance, about finding the flow of the fight and working with it, not against it." For the next hour, Zora continued to teach Marcus, guiding him through different techniques and pushing him to think differently. Every time Marcus thought he had figured it out, Zora would change her approach, forcing him to adapt again. Slowly, Marcus began to see what she meant by balance. It wasn't just about overpowering your opponent. It was about knowing when to fight and when to step back, when to push forward and when to pull back. Finally, as the night began to fall and the stars filled the sky, Zora called for a halt. "That's enough for today," she said, her voice softer now. "You've learned well, Marcus." Marcus lowered his staff, exhausted but more at peace than he had felt in a long time. "I understand now," he said quietly. "It's not just about strength. It's about how I use it, when I use it." Zora nodded. "Exactly. And that's the same in life. It's not just about how strong you are or what you can do. It's about knowing when to fight and when to step back." "You've passed the test, Marcus?" As Marcus stood there, looking at the stars, he realized that this test wasn't just about physical strength. It was about understanding the balance between force and peace, between action and patience. And for the first time, he felt that. He was beginning to see Zora for who she truly was, not just a warrior, but a woman with wisdom, strength, and depth. The days after the test were different. Marcus had learned so much in such a short time, but now he found himself thinking more about Zora than ever before. The evening after the training session, he sat alone outside, staring up at the starry sky. He was trying to process everything. He had learned what Zora had shared with him, and how much he was beginning to understand about the woman who had invited him into her world. For the first time since arriving, Marcus felt like he had crossed a line. No longer was he just an outsider looking in. He was beginning to see Zora not just as a warrior or a baker, but as a person, someone with her own struggles, hopes, and dreams. And he realized that somehow those hopes and dreams were starting to feel important to him too. The next morning after breakfast, Marcus found Zora in the kitchen, her hands busy with kneading dough. She looked up when he entered, her face softening in recognition. "Good morning," Zora greeted him, her voice gentle but strong, as always. "Morning," Marcus replied, walking into the kitchen. The familiar smell of baked goods filled the room, and for a moment he was lost in the warmth of the space. "I've been thinking." Zora raised an eyebrow, her hands still moving with practiced ease. "About what?" "About you," he said simply. "About everything you've shared with me. I think I understand now what you've been trying to teach me. It's not just about fighting or baking, it's about balance. But it's also about finding peace in what you do, no matter how difficult it is. Zora smiled softly, her golden eyes glinting with pride. You're starting to see it, aren't you? It took me a long time to find that peace. But when you can balance your strength with patience, everything starts to make sense. Marcus nodded. He had felt it too. He had learned so much in their time together. But it wasn't just the physical lessons of combat or baking, it was the lessons of patience, of understanding, and of truly seeing another person. Zora placed the dough aside and wiped her hands on her apron. "Would you like to help me today?" she asked, her voice light. Marcus was taken aback. "Help you bake?" he asked, unsure if she was joking. Wasn't much of a cook after all. Zora chuckled. "It's not as hard as you think. Just follow my lead. You'll learn something new." Though still hesitant, Marcus agreed. He stood next to Zora, watching closely as she expertly rolled the dough and shaped it with swift, careful movements. She worked with such confidence, as if baking were just as natural as breathing to her. "See?" she said, handing him a piece of dough. "It's all about feeling the dough, knowing when it's soft enough, when it's firm enough. When you're not focused on the result, but on what you're doing in the moment, everything comes together." Marcus tried to imitate her movements, though it was clumsy at first. The dough didn't roll as smoothly as Zora's, but she didn't seem to mind. She encouraged him with every mistake, showing him how to fix it, how to correct his mistakes. Without feeling frustrated, hours passed. And by the time the bread was ready to bake, Marcus felt a sense of accomplishment, though he had barely done half the work. Zora had been patient with him, guiding him gently and never rushing him. They placed the bread in the oven, the warmth of the baking filling the kitchen. As they waited for it to finish, Zora turned to him, her face serious once again. "Marcus, there's something I want to say about our earlier conversations." Looked at her, curiosity written all over his face. "What is it?" "I know this hasn't been easy for you," she said quietly, her voice softer than usual. "And I know you're not used to thinking about things like balance or understanding someone beyond what they can do. But not just about what I can teach you or show you. I've spent my life doing things on my own, living in my own way. But now I'm starting to realize that I don't want to live like that anymore." Marcus listened intently, his heart pounding. A little faster. There was something in Zora's words that felt like she was opening up. To him in a way she hadn't before. "I want to be understood, Marcus," she continued. "I want someone who sees me as I am, not just as a weapon, not just as a tool, for battle or survival. I've lived through so much, and I've kept so much locked away. But with you, I feel like I'm starting to open up again. I need to know, can you see me, Marcus? Not just for my strength, but for who I am as a whole." Marcus felt his chest tighten at her words. He had been so focused on figuring out his own feelings, his own confusion, that he hadn't truly understood what Zora was asking of him. She wasn't asking for admiration or praise. She wasn't asking for someone to take care of her or protect her. She was asking for someone to see her, truly see her, to accept her for everything she was, strengths and everything in between. "I can see you, Zora," Marcus said, his voice steady, "and I'm starting to understand you. Not perfect, and I don't have all the answers. But I'm here, and I'm willing to learn, willing to see you, not just as a warrior, but as someone who has more to offer than I ever imagined." Slowly, her golden eyes warm. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "That means more to me than you can understand." The oven timer went off, and they pulled the warm, freshly baked bread from the oven. As they shared the bread together, Marcus realized that the bond between them was stronger than he had ever expected. It wasn't about fighting battles or baking bread. It was about understanding, trust, and the quiet moments of connection that built a foundation stronger than anything he had ever known. The following weeks passed by in a blur of new experiences and quiet moments of understanding. Marcus had spent more time with Zora and Lyra, learning about the Zoran people and their ways. Every day he discovered something new, not just about the Zoran, but about himself. Zora's teachings had changed him slowly but surely. He was starting to see the world in a different way, one that was less about duty and more about connection. Zora had kept her promise, never pushing him, but always guiding him. She would often ask him to join her in her kitchen, where they would bake together, the warmth of the oven creating a peaceful atmosphere. The simple act of kneading dough and preparing food together had become their shared time, a quiet bond that spoke volumes without words. But there was still the matter of the question that had lingered in the air since their first meeting. Could Marcus truly see Zora for who she was? Could he accept her not just as a warrior or a baker, but as a woman with emotions, with hopes and dreams of her own? And most importantly, could he offer her the companionship she had longed for all these years? One evening after another day of work, Marcus found himself once again standing at the edge of the settlement. The stars above shimmered brightly, and the cool breeze carried the scent of the earth. He had been thinking about everything about his time with Zora, the lessons she had taught him and the quiet moments they had shared. It was clear to him now that she had opened herself up to him in ways he hadn't expected. She had shown him a side of herself that no one else had seen, a side that was both strong and vulnerable, fierce and gentle. He had learned to respect her in ways that went beyond admiration for her strength. But now, the time had come for him to make a decision. Could he truly see her for who she was? Could he offer her the companionship she deserved? Or would he walk away, back to his life as a soldier, unable to fully accept the bond that was forming between them? As he stood there lost in thought, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw Zora walking toward him, her expression calm, but serious. She stopped beside him, her gaze following the stars as well. "I've been waiting for you to come to this point," Zora said quietly. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, a sense of something important hanging in the air. "You've learned so much, Marcus. But there's one last thing you need to understand." Marcus swallowed, unsure of what she meant. "What is it?" Zora looked at him, her golden eyes steady. "You've been learning about balance, about seeing me for who I really am. But now it's time for you to decide. Can you truly accept me, Marcus? Can you see me not just as a warrior or a baker, but as a woman who needs something more than what she's had for so long?" Her question hung in the air between them, and Marcus felt his heart race. He had known that this moment would come eventually, but now that it was here, he found himself unsure of what to say. Zora continued, her voice gentle. "I've spent my life fighting, surviving, and learning how to be strong. But I've also learned something else. Strength isn't everything. It's important, yes, but it's not all there is. I need someone who will stand with me, not just in battle, but in life. Someone who will understand me, who will be with me, not because I'm strong, but because I am me." Marcus took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling on him. He had spent his entire life in service to duty, never allowing himself to think about relationships or companionship. But now, standing beside Zora, he understood. She wasn't asking for someone to save her. She wasn't asking for admiration or praise. She was asking for something simple, something real. She was asking for someone to be with her, to share her life, to see her for who she truly was. "I understand now," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I've seen you, Zora, not just as a warrior, not just as a baker, but as a woman with everything that comes with that. I've seen your strength, your kindness, your wisdom, and I've realized that I want to stand with you. I want to be by your side, not because of what you can do, but because of who you are." Zora's expression softened, a faint smile appearing on her lips. She stepped closer to him, her presence as powerful as ever, but there was a gentleness in her eyes that Marcus hadn't seen before. "You've made your decision." Then she said, her voice low and full of emotion. Marcus nodded, his heart full. "Yes, I've made my decision. I want to be with you, Zora. I want to learn more from you, not just about strength or balance, but about life. I want to be with you as a partner, as someone who can stand by your side, just as you've stood by yours." Zora's smile widened, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, standing in the quiet night, understanding each other in a way that only time and experience could have brought about. "I'm glad," Zora said softly. Why, I've waited a long time for someone to see me this way. And I'm honored that it's you, Marcus. The moment between them was quiet, but it felt like everything had fallen into place. Marcus had come to this planet as a soldier, unsure of what to expect. But now, as he stood next to Zora, he realized that he had found something far more valuable than any victory on the battlefield. He had found someone to share his life with. Someone who saw him for who he truly was, just as he saw her, and as they stood there side by side, Marcus knew that this was just the beginning. There was much more to discover, much more to learn, and together they would face whatever the future held.